Welcome to World Order Watch. Today is for a deep dive. We're looking at this really complex, fascinating web of shifts, geopolitical, economic, that are reshaping things right now in real time. And this isn't just about tomorrow's news headlines. It feels more like a fundamental, well, a re-architecture of how nations interact. Old alliances are being tested, new pathways opening up. Our mission here is to connect those dots for you, maybe find some of those aha moments, and show why these, big global shifts actually matter to your life.
It's true. We really are at a, let's call it critical juncture. Established norms, the way things usually work in international relations, global economics, they're being challenged. And not just talked about through direct, concrete actions by major players. We're seeing new alliances, new economic systems emerging. These could fundamentally alter global trade, security, maybe even the cost of things day to day. So today, we'll dissect these actions and, crucially, their ripple effects across continents. We want to help you understand not just what's happening, but the deeper why behind it all.
Okay, let's jump right in then, because the most immediate thing is happening, well, today, August 27th. It marks the start of significant new U.S. tariffs on Indian goods. President Trump has imposed an additional 25% tariff. That brings the total to a hefty 50%. That's on top of an existing 25%, right?
On top of doubling, essentially, a massive barrier.
So why now? The administration's pointing to a couple of things. First, India buying crude oil from Russia. The U.S. sees that as helping Russia's war effort. Second, India's digital policies. Things like their digital tax, their digital market regulation, basically levies on big foreign tech companies operating in India. Washington views them as discriminatory.
And the potential economic hit for India is huge. We're talking about $60 billion worth of exports directly affected.
Exactly. Key sectors, too. Textiles, gems and jewelry, shrimp, carpets, furniture, often very labor-intensive industries. Some predictions are suggesting, maybe up to a 70% drop in export volume in those specific areas. That could be devastating for India's GDP and, employment. Millions of jobs, potentially.
Millions. And the real insight here, beyond just the numbers, is how this highlights that deep tension over national sovereignty. Energy procurement, economic policy. And what immediately jumps out is this perception of, double standards. The U.S. criticizes India for Russian oil, but then you hear reports about the U.S. itself secretly discussing ExxonMobil maybe re-entering Russia's Sakhalin-1 project. And the U.S. still buys Russian uranium, hexafluoride, palladium fertilizer.
Right, so it raises that question.
Exactly. Why single out India? Why the profiteering accusation from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent? It just shows how complex, sometimes contradictory global energy politics gets when national interests collide.
India's response has been pretty firm, hasn't it? Their Ministry of External Affairs called the accusations baseless, the U.S. move unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. They're basically saying, look, we'll buy oil where we get the best deal, and we're not funding the war. India's ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar, said the same.
And Prime Minister Modi himself, speaking on Medabad, really leaned into that make in India, make for the world idea. Strengthening the economy, becoming self-reliant. It's a clear signal of resisting pressure.
And then there's this diplomatic layer, which is quite interesting. German media headlines like, Trump calls but Modi doesn't answer. They're reporting Modi hasn't taken 4 recent calls from Trump. It's not just ignoring the phone. It seems to highlight India's what they call strategic resilience, a deliberate choice to prioritize their own interests, their autonomy, maybe resisting that phone deal diplomacy style we saw with, say, the U.S.-Vietnam trade deal.
Yeah, Modi's reportedly not a fan of that approach.
And meanwhile, Trump is apparently getting more frustrated, not just by India, but also his, public frustration over not getting that Russia-Ukraine peace deal sorted.
And that's the striking takeaway here. How economic pressure can sometimes backfire, or at least accelerate these deeper shifts. Instead of isolating India, it seems to be reinforcing its independence streak, and maybe pushing it closer to non-Western groups. It's not just about sovereignty. It's nations actively trying to de-risk their economies from traditional dependencies. They're not just talking about alternatives anymore. They seem to be actively building them.
Yeah, and this fallout, it's definitely not just a U.S.-India thing. These tariffs seem to be acting like a catalyst, pushing other countries, whole blocks even, to rethink relationships. Take the EU, for instance. They're facing Trump's 15% tariffs on most of their goods, plus higher rates on metals like steel, aluminum, copper. So what are they doing? launching a pact for the Mediterranean. This isn't minor.
No, it's a significant strategic move.
The stated aim is diversifying trade, reducing dependency not just on Russia and China, but now explicitly the U.S. too. They're talking deeper economic links with North African and Middle Eastern countries: Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Palestine, Tunisia, Syria. Quite a list.
A whole region, basically.
And the focus is on regulatory alignment, matching EU single market rules, digital governance, environmental standards, clean energy, trying to create a cohesive economic zone. They've even appointed a dedicated commissioner for the Mediterranean, Croatia's Dubravka Hujka. That signals real institutional backing, a long-term thing.
It absolutely does, a structural shift.
Okay, then you've got the BRICS bloc: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Trump's tariffs, including that 50% hit on Brazil, seem to be, well, pushing them closer together. President Xi Jinping of China called China-Russia ties the most stable partnership. And he's personally welcoming Modi and Putin to the SKO summit in Tianjin soon, August 31st.
That's Modi's first visit to China in over 7 years, right?
Exactly. So the timing, the visuals analysts are calling it powerful optics, a statement against U.S. dominance, maybe showcasing a kind of post-American-led order.
Where major powers convene on their own terms.
And India is actually playing a lead role in challenging the dollar within BRICS. They've opened up rupee-based trade for all members. The Reserve Bank made it easier for foreign banks to open these special rupee Vostro accounts. No prior approval needed anymore.
Explain those Vostro accounts simply for us.
Right. Essentially, they're just rupee accounts held by foreign banks in India. It lets them settle trade directly in rupees, bypassing the U.S. dollar as the middleman. India has already set up 156 of these accounts with banks from 30 different countries. Russia, Bangladesh, the UAE are included. And apparently, they've saved something like $13 billion just on Russian oil imports by using these rupee settlements.
$13 billion. That's not small change. And when you zoom out, it's clear these aren't just reactions. They feel like deliberate blueprints for a multipolar world. I mean, BRICS represents, what, 40% of the world's population, 25% of global economic output, and they're already settling about 90% of their internal trade in currencies other than the dollar.
90%. Wow.
Yeah. And they're speeding up development of BRICS Pay. It's a blockchain-based payment system. The whole point is to bypass Western financial infrastructure like SWIFT. They're promising speeds of 20,000 messages per second. Minimal fees. That's potentially way faster than SWIFT, a real alternative.
So a genuine competitor potentially emerging.
Potentially. And you see leaders like Brazil's Lula rejecting direct talks with Trump, calling them unnecessary and demeaning, preferring to talk within BRICS. It signals a fundamental pivot, away from that traditional Western-centric way of doing finance and diplomacy. For you, the listener, this could mean global trade becoming less dollar-tied down the road. That might affect currency stability, maybe even the price of imported goods.
Okay, so amidst all this trade and economic maneuvering, the war in Ukraine continues. But even there, India's role seems to be shifting, becoming more prominent. President Zelensky of Ukraine publicly thanked PM Modi on Ukraine's Independence Day. He appreciated India's focus on peace, on dialogue. He specifically said Ukraine counts on India's contribution to end the war.
That's significant language.
Yeah. And Modi, remembering his visit to Kyiv last year, August 2024, he reiterated India's commitment to an early, abiding, and peaceful resolution through dialogue and diplomacy. Ukraine's ambassador to India even confirmed Zelensky is expected to visit India. They see India as key, partly because of its, quote, long-standing ties with Moscow.
It puts India in this unique spot, doesn't it? Maintaining ties with both Russia and Ukraine, a potential bridge in a really fractured conflict. But, I mean, there's always a question, does trying to be friends with everyone risk pleasing no one? Can they actually broker peace, or does it risk alienating both sides eventually? It's a tough balancing act.
It is, and it contrasts so sharply with what seems like the limits of U.S. power here. Sources suggest President Trump is more frustrated publicly about the war dragging on, his inability to broker peace. We also hear reports the Pentagon quietly blocking Ukraine from using certain U.S. long-range missiles, the ATACMS, to hit inside Russia. That limits Ukraine's options.
Which some argue might actually prolong the conflict.
Right. And Trump's old end the war in 24 hours talk. Now it sounds more like, I don't know what I'm going to do, even suggesting the U.S. might just do nothing and say it's your fight. It really does show the practical limits of American power in these complex, drawn-out situations.
Definitely.
China's role, though, still feels a bit murky. ambiguous. President Xi sent a message to Zelensky on Independence Day, the first since the invasion, emphasizing steady relations. But Ukraine apparently remains deeply skeptical about China as a peace guarantor. They point to Beijing not stepping in earlier and its ongoing support for Moscow's war effort, think the drone market, for instance. China's also denied those German reports about maybe sending peacekeepers.
So what you see is the conflict exposing these diverging interests among the big powers. The U.S. seems cautious, maybe trying to limit escalation. China's trying to project neutrality, but its economic ties still clearly benefit Russia. This whole dynamic is going to shape how this conflict unfolds, how it might eventually end. And it does make you wonder about the effectiveness of traditional power brokers when new players like India step up with different approaches.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Beyond trade and diplomacy, there are two other critical areas seeing big shifts: tech rivalry and nuclear power. The U.S.-China tech war just keeps escalating. Remember U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's comments, pretty blunt, about not selling the best, second best, or even third best tech, specifically NVIDIA H20 chips, to China. The stated goal was to get Chinese developers addicted to American technology. That definitely didn't go down well in Beijing.
No. Insulting remarks was the term used, I believe. It's not just about selling chips. It's a strategic play for control over future AI development.
And China's response. Reports say they've asked their domestic companies to scale back buying those NVIDIA H20 chips. That hits a major U.S. company directly and signals China pushing harder for its own tech self-reliance.
And thinking long-term here, this isn't just a spat over semiconductors. It's a battle for tech supremacy that could define economic and military power for years. The U.S. strategy, trying to create that addiction, it's understandable from their perspective, but it might just accelerate China's own efforts to build its independent tech ecosystem. For you, the listener, this could mean fewer global tech standards, maybe less innovation if R&D gets fractured, plus ongoing concerns about data security as tech becomes more nationalized.
Then shifting to the nuclear front, another really critical area. President Trump mentioned discussions with Putin about nuclear arms reduction after their Alaska summit. Trump emphasized the urgency, saying it's too much power. Currently, Russia has the most warheads, around 5,459. The U.S. is close behind at 5,177, but China is expanding rapidly. They're estimated at 600 now, adding about 100 a year since 2023. Predictions are they could catch up within 5 years.
A dramatic expansion.
Yeah. And Trump indicated he wants to bring China into trilateral talks. U.S., Russia, China. That's a big shift from the usual U.S.-Russia bilateral focus. And it's urgent because the main treaty, New START, which limits deployed strategic nukes for the U.S. and Russia, expires February 5th, 2026. Renewal looks pretty dim without involving China in broader talks.
And this is where you see the interconnection. Tech rivalry, nuclear arms, they seem separate, but they're key levers in this unfolding great power competition. China's nuclear expansion, combined with New START potentially expiring, that has huge strategic implications. Without that framework, we face a real risk of a new, unconstrained arms race. And it's not just about numbers. It's about stability, predictability, avoiding miscalculation.
Yeah.
This could fundamentally change global security for decades.
So let's try and wrap our heads around this. What does it all mean for you navigating this very rapidly changing world? We've seen tariffs sparking trade disputes, pushing old allies apart, maybe forging new economic blocs with their own payment systems. We've seen diplomatic efforts for peace running alongside ongoing war, plus this high-stakes tech race and a really precarious nuclear balance.
If you step back and connect the dots, it really feels like the world order isn't just shifting. It's undergoing a fundamental re-architecture. The old rules, the established power dynamics, they're being seriously challenged. It makes for a more unpredictable world, certainly, but maybe also a more multipolar one. It definitely demands a new level of awareness from all of us.
Which leads to a big question, doesn't it? As nations push their own sovereignty, pursue these diverse, sometimes conflicting interests, are we just seeing traditional global leadership being tested? Or is this something else? Maybe the messy, difficult birth of a different kind of global governance, one that's more distributed, maybe more adaptable.
And thinking about all this, what really stands out to you? How do you see these interconnected events, the trade shifts, the diplomacy, the tech battles, the nuclear worries shaping things like global trade flows, resource access, maybe even how conflicts get resolved, not just tomorrow, but for years to come?
Lots to think about there. We really encourage you to keep watching, keep questioning, keep digging deeper into these complex stories. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.